Between 1647 and 1685, over 300 wills were executed in the small Newfield settlement of Connecticut, all processed by three men, the Pemberton brothers. What troubled historians wasn't just the number of wills, but the unsettling discovery beneath the floorboards of their home, hundreds of glass vials containing opium and belladonna residue, along with journals detailing the divine visions of dying colonists. These visions, it seemed, mysteriously benefited the Pemberton family's growing wealth. Incredibly, 23 people died shortly after signing their wills, all experiencing what witnesses described as ecstatic communion with the divine. Authorities, fearing a scandal, sealed the records to avoid undermining trust in colonial institutions. This dark chapter remained buried until 1998, when a Yale researcher uncovered the case and pieced together what appeared to be early America's most sinister inheritance fraud. Help me with a like and a subscribe to motivate me to make better videos, and don't forget to comment which country you are from. The researcher found that the Pembertons kept detailed records of their victims' last moments, including their drug-induced ramblings, revealing how they carefully manipulated religious fervor to secure wealth. This chilling account tells the story of the Pemberton family's decades-long scheme of manipulation, deception, and murder. Did they simply exploit medical ignorance and religious devotion, or was there something far darker at play? The truth, as you'll discover, is far more disturbing than most historical accounts dare to admit. Now let's return to 1647 Newfield, where our story begins. Newfield, founded by strict Puritans seeking religious liberty, was a small community of under 60 families struggling with food shortages and disease in the harsh winter of 1647. During this desperate time, three brothers from Massachusetts Bay, Obadiah, Jeremiah, and Cornelius Peyton, arrived presenting forged letters of recommendation that established them as men of importance. Their arrival was no accident. They had carefully chosen Newfield as an ideal target. Obadiah, posing as a trained physician, became indispensable to the sick settlers. Jeremiah, a captivating preacher that mesmerized the town with his intense sermons. Cornelius, the youngest, was appointed magistrate due to his legal expertise. Within months, the Pembertons were firmly entrenched in the community, building a large home and creating an air of respectability. Little did the townspeople know they had been lured into a deadly trap by these seemingly benevolent strangers. Cornelius's legal work, Obadiah's apothecary for medicines, and Jeremiah's private prayer chamber seemed innocent enough. But what stood out about the Pemberton brothers was their lack of wives or children. They claimed their lives were devoted to service rather than family. In a pious community, such a dedication was viewed with admiration, and few suspected the brothers' true motives. They quickly became essential figures in the town Obadiah treated. The sick Jeremiah offered spiritual guidance, and Cornelius handled legal matters. The first sign of their sinister intentions came when Sarah Holcomb, a wealthy widow, fell ill. She had inherited a large estate, and the brothers took a special interest in her care. While the townspeople saw nothing suspicious, the brothers secretly administered a mysterious elixir of divine sight to Sarah. This potion, which sent her into a delirious state, allowed them to manipulate her into making a will, bequeathing her estate to the Pembertons. The brothers used the resulting visions to justify the bequest, portraying Sarah's actions as divine revelation. When Sarah died in December 1647, her funeral was attended by the entire town. Jeremiah delivered a eulogy. Cornelius read the will, and the community accepted the divine nature of her final wishes. This marked the beginning of the Pembertons' scheme. Word spread, and soon other families asked the brothers to attend to their dying loved ones. The pattern repeated. Obadiah would diagnose the illness, Jeremiah would offer spiritual comfort, and Cornelius would ensure legal matters were taken care of. As each person passed, the brothers recorded visions that seemed to suggest the transfer of property to them, all for the glory of God. By spring 1650, the Petons had acquired several properties, becoming the wealthiest family in Newfield. They built a larger home, hired workers, and gained influence over the settlement's governance. Their public acts of charity and piety concealed their true motives, making any suspicion unthinkable. When Goodman William Fletcher questioned their growing wealth, Jeremiah responded not with anger, but with sorrowful concern, cleverly deflecting suspicion and continuing their deceptive rise. The Peton brothers skillfully manipulated Newfield's trust through spiritual and psychological tactics. When questioned about their lack of families, they claimed their lives were dedicated to serving God and the community. This explanation was accepted without question in a place where piety was revered. They quickly became pillars of the town. Obadiah tirelessly treated the sick. Jeremiah offered spiritual counsel, and Cornelius handled legal matters. The first sign of their sinister intentions surfaced with Sarah Hulcom, a wealthy widow who fell ill. The brothers took special interest in her care, secretly administering a drug that induced visions they claimed were divinely inspired. These visions led Sarah to make a will, giving her estate to the Petons. The community accepted her bequest as divine will, solidifying the brothers' position. As more people died under similar circumstances, the brothers' wealth grew, and they established a ministry of preparation where they convinced dying individuals to leave their property to the Petons through visions. By 1650, they controlled most of Newfield's wealth and resources. Their acts of charity and piety shielded them from suspicion. When Goodman Fletcher questioned their growing wealth, Jeremiah deflected with a sorrowful response, making Fletcher feel guilty for his doubts. The brothers also instituted Testimony Sundays, where those who had witnessed divine visions from the dying shared their experiences, reinforcing the Petons' spiritual legitimacy and discouraging skepticism. The brothers' grip on Newfield was nearly unshakable. By 1655, with Jeremiah as the official minister, Cornelius as magistrate, and Obadiah holding unquestioned medical authority. However, everything changed with the arrival of Constance Peton in 1664, 17 years after the brothers had established their dominance. She introduced herself as Obadiah's niece, the daughter of a fourth brother who had remained in England. Constance quickly charmed the community with her warmth and willingness to help others, standing in stark contrast to her uncle's stern, distant personalities. Her arrival threatened the Petons' secrecy. Although the brothers maintained their public personas, the close quarters of colonial life made it impossible to hide everything. Constance began to suspect something was wrong when she discovered hidden vials of unknown substances in Obadiah's medicine chest. The incident could have been overlooked, but things took a darker turn when she witnessed Obadiah administering a mysterious liquid to Thomas Thatcher, a prosperous farmer who had fallen ill. Soon after, Thatcher began speaking in disjointed sentences about angels, and Cornelius recorded his delirious ramblings, turning them into legally binding documents. Disturbed Constance began paying closer attention to the brothers' methods. She noticed patterns in their behavior, particularly how they focused on wealthy, childless individuals. Despite her growing suspicions, she remained silent, as speaking out would threaten her safety and position in the community. Instead, she began documenting everything in secret, keeping a journal and assisting Cornelius with his paperwork. The more she learned, the more she realized the extent of the brothers' manipulation and deception. ChatGPT said, in the winter of 1665, 18 months after Constance Peton's arrival in Newfield, a heavy snowstorm left her alone in the house while her uncles rushed to tend to a dying elder. Seizing the opportunity, Constance thoroughly searched the home, focusing on areas her uncles had kept secure. In the cellar, behind a false wall concealed by firewood, she discovered a hidden room that revealed the full extent of the brothers' activities. Shelves lined with vials and jars, stacks of journals detailing their treatments of dying colonists, and a sophisticated laboratory filled with distillation equipment and preserved specimens showed that Obadiah's medical knowledge went far beyond the average frontier physician. Among the items, Constance found personal effects of previous victims, such as locks of hair and jewelry, all meticulously labeled. Most disturbing was a ledger in Cornelius's handwriting listing properties they had acquired, including a chilling entry: CP inheritance from maternal grandmother to be secured upon her 18th year. The initials matched Constance's own, and with a shock, she realized that she herself was their next target. Constance used the snowstorm to her advantage, copying key evidence into her journal and formulating a plan to escape. She planned to flee to Hartford as soon as the weather allowed, but the harsh winter delayed her departure. As the snow persisted, Constance noticed a subtle shift in her uncle's behavior: more questions about her health, comments about her inheritance, and Obadiah's growing interest in her personal belongings. When questioned about it, Obadiah claimed concern for her health, suggesting that she might be showing signs of the melancholy that had afflicted her father. This only strengthened Constance's resolve to escape. On April 15, 1666, she planned to leave with a merchant convoy traveling to Hartford, having gathered evidence and secured some money. The night before her departure, she recorded a final entry in her journal, expressing her fear that the Petons suspected her escape plan. She wrote that Obadiah had prepared a special tea for her, which she pretended to drink but secretly disposed of. She feared that she would not reach Hartford, and urged whoever found her journal to expose her uncle's wickedness. The next day, Constance was seen near the village center, seemingly waiting for the convoy. Jeremiah found her there, and witnesses later reported that she appeared lucid, asking about the merchant's arrival time. However, Obadiah later claimed that Constance had wandered off in confusion due to a fever. Several witnesses contradicted this, remembering her as clear-eyed and composed. When questioned by John Pratt, a village elder, Jeremiah claimed that Constance's womanly humors had affected her reason, brushing off any concern. The brothers organized a search deliberately, directing people away from their property, while Cornelius stayed home to receive news. This ensured that for critical hours no one could approach the Peton house. What happened during those hours remains unclear, but later journal entries suggested that Constance was forcibly given the same elixir used on previous victims, though in a higher fatal dose. 3 days later, Constance's body was found in the woods, nearly a mile from the Peton home. Obadiah pronounced that she had succumbed to the same melancholy that had claimed her father, claiming she had wandered off in a delirium. Jeremiah led a solemn funeral, speaking of divine providence and the tragedy of a young life cut short. The case might have ended there as just another tragic death in an era of high mortality. But Rebecca Wilson, a local woman, began to question the circumstances surrounding Constance's death. After Constance's funeral, Rebecca Wilson, who had been assisting with domestic duties in the Peton household, discovered a loose floorboard in Constance's room. Beneath it, she found a hidden journal which she couldn't read herself, so she brought it to her husband, Thomas Wilson. After reading it, Thomas was deeply disturbed by the contents, which led him to take action. Rather than confronting the Petons directly, he made a copy of the journal and sent it with a trusted friend to Hartford, addressed to the colonial authorities. His caution proved wise, as 2 weeks later, Thomas fell ill after dining with the Petons. Within days, he died, reportedly experiencing terrifying visions, which Jeremiah Peton interpreted as signs of divine judgment. In Hartford, Constance's journal prompted an investigation. However, officials hesitated to act against the Petons without undeniable proof, especially given their revered standing in the community and their pious reputation. The investigation was slow, gathering testimonies from former residents and comparing the pattern of inheritance benefiting the Petons. But many potential witnesses were too afraid to speak out, fearing spiritual retribution or legal consequences if their allegations proved false. The brothers had skillfully cultivated support, with numerous people ready to defend their character. Furthermore, Constance's journal, while compelling, was the account of a young woman often dismissed as hysteria in colonial society. The central allegation, the brothers drugging the dying to manipulate their wills, touched on medical and spiritual matters that few colonial officials felt qualified to evaluate. Determined to build an irrefutable case, Hartford officials dispatched an undercover agent, Thomas Bradford, to Newfield in early 1667. Posing as a wealthy merchant with a wasting illness, Bradford became a patient of Obadiah Peaton. His reports confirmed Constance's allegations, describing how Obadiah administered strange medicines that induced confusion, while Jeremiah guided spiritual conversations, and Cornelius prepared legal documents for signature. By early 1667, enough evidence had been gathered to arrest the Peatons and search their property. However, when authorities arrived in Newfield, they found the settlement in chaos. Mysteriously, the Peaton home had burned down the previous night, and the brothers were presumed dead. The fire destroyed much of the physical evidence, and with the main suspects deceased, the investigation stalled. The story might have ended there, but in the spring of 1668, as the new owner of the Peaton property began clearing the ruins, workers discovered a hidden cellar room that had survived the fire. Inside, they found hundreds of vials, journals dating back to 1647, and personal effects of Constance Peaton, including strands of her hair and fingernail clippings. Most damning was a final journal entry written by Cornelius the day before the fire, stating, "The girl's journal has been found. Wilson has betrayed us. Hartford will send men. All must be cleansed by fire, and we must begin anew elsewhere." This discovery sent shockwaves through the community, prompting a colony-wide search for the brothers now believed to have staged their deaths. Descriptions of the Peatons were circulated throughout New England, but despite efforts to track them down, no confirmed sightings were ever reported. The true fate of the Peaton brothers remains a mystery. Some historians suggest they fled to the southern colonies or returned to England under assumed identities. Others believe they perished in the fire while attempting to destroy evidence, or that they were secretly captured and executed without public record to avoid scandal. Colonial records from Virginia hint at a possible connection. In 1670, three brothers named Preston established themselves in Jamestown, with roles in medicine, law, and religion. Their arrival coincided with a series of deaths among wealthy colonists who reportedly experienced divine visions before signing new wills. The Prestons disappeared in 1673, leaving behind a hidden room with equipment similar to that found in the Peaton home. Similarly, parish records from Bristol, England, document three brothers named Penworth, who arrived in 1675, establishing themselves in medicine, religion, and law. Their charitable work with the dying ceased abruptly in 1683, when a fire destroyed their home, another suspicious conflagration with no bodies found. Whether these were the same men under different names remains speculative, but the pattern of behavior and the convenient disappearances suggest the Peatons may have continued their fraudulent scheme for decades after fleeing Newfield. What is certain is the lasting impact the Peatons' actions had on legal practices in Connecticut. In 1670, the colonial legislature passed the witness statute, requiring multiple unrelated witnesses to validate a will, a direct response to the manipulation and abuse that occurred under the Peaton brothers' reign. The 1670 witness statute, which required multiple unrelated witnesses for deathbed, will changes and prohibited those who stood to benefit from serving as witnesses, specifically aimed at preventing fraud through false claim of divine revelation, a clear response to the Peaton brothers' methods. Over time, the case faded from public memory, preserved mainly in legal records and occasional references in private correspondence. By the mid-18th century, it had become little more than a cautionary tale for law students and medical apprentices about the dangers of unchecked authority. when spiritual power, medical knowledge, and legal influence merged without oversight. However, the Pemberton case resurfaced in 1998, thanks to Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne, a Yale historian, researching early American palliative care. During her investigation, Dr. Hawthorne discovered references to the case in Jonathan Edwards's personal papers. Edwards, the 18th century theologian, had used the case as evidence in his private writings about the dangers of false spiritual claims. Intrigued, Dr. Hawthorne conducted a systematic search through Connecticut's colonial records, eventually uncovering the original investigation documents in a misfiled archive box at the Connecticut Historical Society. Among the materials were copies of the Pemberton's journals, witness testimonies, and most importantly, Constance Pemberton's preserved personal journal. Historians find the Pemberton case significant not only because of the brothers' scheme, but because of what it reveals about the intersection of medicine, religion, and law in colonial America. The brothers exploited a society where these domains were tightly intertwined, using each to bolster their authority in the others. Their medical knowledge gave them access to the dying, their religious standing protected them from suspicion, and their legal authority allowed them to formalize their fraudulent acquisitions. Modern analysis of the Pemberton's elixir of divine sight, a concoction made from opium, belladonna, and possibly other psychoactive plants, suggests an unexpectedly advanced understanding of neurochemistry for the 17th century. Dr. Melissa Thornton, a medical historian at Johns Hopkins University, analyzed the formula in 2002, noting that the Pembertons had developed a form of truth serum combined with a hallucinogen specifically calibrated to induce a cognitive state where victims remained verbally responsive but highly suggestible with diminished critical thinking. The formula was refined through careful observation and experimentation. Early journal entries show adjustments to the mixture based on the effects observed in different subjects. What is particularly disturbing is evidence that the brothers conducted experiments on unsuspecting travelers who sought shelter with them. The brothers observed these individuals' reactions, adjusting the formula and refining their techniques based on the results. These transient visitors, whose names were never recorded, were chosen because their short stay meant their odd behavior wouldn't attract long-term attention. When they left, their subsequent disappearance or strange behavior would raise no alarms. The journals reveal a chilling level of calculation in the brothers' methods. They studied each victim's speech patterns, religious beliefs, and property holdings before administering their deadly concoction, ensuring their fraudulent schemes continued under the guise of divine revelation. The Pemberton brothers used their elixir to induce delirium in their victims, during which they would ask leading questions incorporating personal details about the individuals' lives. This made the resulting divine instructions appear authentically personal and convincing. By introducing specific religious imagery known to resonate with each victim, they crafted experiences that witnesses would find spiritually compelling. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect is that the Pemberton scheme was not their first. Early journal entries suggest that they had attempted similar methods in Massachusetts Bay Colony, but were forced to relocate after raising suspicions. This pattern of calculated movement and adaptation indicates a level of premeditation beyond mere opportunism, suggesting a carefully orchestrated criminal enterprise disguised as a religious service. The Pemberton's case serves as a dark reminder of how authority, especially when cloaked in the mantle of religion, can be manipulated for personal gain. In a society where questioning religious experiences was considered sinful, the brothers created an almost perfect system of exploitation, targeting the most vulnerable at their weakest moments. While the historical record goes silent on the Pembertons, after 1668, local legends in various New England communities suggest the brothers may have continued their practices under different identities. Similar cases were recorded, including one in Rhode Island in 1682 involving three brothers named Preston, who used remarkably similar methods. By 1690, reports from Philadelphia surfaced about spiritual physicians who helped the wealthy achieve divine visions before their deaths, often resulting in unexpected changes to their wills. Whether these were the Pitons operating under new identities or copycat schemes inspired by their success remains unclear. However, it's evident that their methods became a template for others to exploit the same vulnerabilities in colonial society. The most poignant aspect of the Piton case is the fate of Constance. Historical records confirm that she was set to inherit a substantial estate from her maternal grandmother upon turning 18, property in England worth far more than all the Pitons had accumulated through their fraudulent activities. The brothers' plan, as detailed in their private journals, was to begin administering small, undetectable doses of their compounds to Constance months before her 18th birthday, gradually increasing the dose until she experienced a spiritual revelation directing her to sign over her inheritance to them, followed by a fatal overdose that would appear as a natural illness. Constance's discovery of their scheme and her attempted escape represents one of history's great what might have been moments. Had she reached Hartford with her evidence, the Pitons might have been stopped years earlier, saving numerous victims from their predation. Instead, her death became just another in the brothers' long list of crimes, distinguished only by the fact that it ultimately led to their exposure. In the centuries since, the Piton case has been referenced in legal scholarship as one of the earliest documented instances of systematic inheritance fraud in American history. It has also been studied by medical historians as an early example of pharmaceutical manipulation for criminal purposes, demonstrating how knowledge of medicine and religion could be wielded to exploit the most vulnerable. For religious scholars, the Piton case serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unquestioning faith in spiritual authority. The site where the Piton home once stood remains undeveloped to this day, now part of a protected historical area in the town of Newfield, Connecticut. Local residents still speak of strange dreams afflicting those who linger too long near the foundation stones, the only remnants of the original structure. Whether these tales stem from the psychological impact of the site's grim history or something more mysterious remains uncertain, much like the Piton case itself, a matter open to personal interpretation. What is certain is that between 1647 and 1667, the three Piton brothers systematically exploited the faith, fear, and vulnerability of a colonial community, amassing wealth and power through a meticulously orchestrated fraud that claimed the lives of dozens. Their methods combined scientific knowledge, religious manipulation, and legal maneuvering in ways far ahead of their time in criminal sophistication. As you listen to this account, you might wonder how such a scheme could succeed for so long without detection. The answer lies in a perfect storm of conditions, a society where questioning religious experiences was seen as suspicious, where medical knowledge was limited and unregulated, where legal documentation was rudimentary and concentrated in a few hands, and where community trust was paramount for survival, making people hesitant to voice suspicions about respected figures. In many ways, the story of the Piton brothers reflects our own vulnerabilities to exploitation by those who prey on our deepest beliefs and fears. While the specific circumstances may differ across centuries, the human tendencies they manipulated remain constant: our fear of death, our hope for divine favor, our trust in authority, and our reluctance to question those who speak in the name of higher powers. If this dark historical narrative has sent chills down your spine, share it with someone who appreciates true historical mysteries. Hit the like button to help others discover this forgotten chapter of American history, and subscribe to our channel to never miss another tale from the shadows of the past. Do you miss our explorations into the shadows lurking in our past? Do you believe the Piton brothers truly perished in that fire, or do you think they escaped to continue their schemes elsewhere? Leave your theories in the comments below. The true power of the Pemberton case lies not in its sensationalism, but in its plausibility, an uncomfortable reminder that such calculated exploitation did happen, and perhaps continues to happen in different forms whenever authority remains unquestioned and unaccountable. Their story reminds us that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are not supernatural beings, but ordinary humans who have learned to weaponize our deepest beliefs against us. As a final note, Dr. Hawthorne's research continues at Yale, where she and her team are working to compile a complete list of the Pemberton brothers' victims and trace any surviving family lines. Their goal is not only historical documentation, but also a form of long-delayed justice, acknowledging the wrongs committed against these forgotten colonists and restoring their stories to our collective memory. The next time you pass an ancient church or colonial-era cemetery, perhaps you'll pause to wonder about the stories buried there, not just those of faith and community, but also of those who may have exploited both for their own dark purposes. For in the shadows of even our most sacred institutions, predators have always found ways to hunt, counting on our reluctance to believe that evil can wear the face of respectability and speak the language of our deepest convictions. And perhaps, ultimately, that is the most enduring legacy of the Pemberton brothers, not the wealth they accumulated or the lives they took, but the uncomfortable question they force us to confront across the centuries. In whom do we place our trust, and what evidence do we require before questioning that trust, even in our most vulnerable moments? This mystery shows us the dangerous intersection of authority, vulnerability, and blind faith. What do you think of this story? Do you believe everything was revealed about the Pemberton's fate? Leave your thoughts below. If you enjoyed this tale and want more chilling stories like this, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share with someone who loves mysteries. See you in the next one. Thank you everyone for watching the video. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel to watch the next interesting videos.